All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to our Faith Conversations. Mako and I are back from vacation, which is much needed. And tonight on our return, we have a very special guest, Rolondo Talbott, and he is on the City of Claremont Police Commission. So we're going to be talking about the relationship between a faith-based organization such as Granite Creek Community Church and the city police department. And the irony of this whole situation is that a few months ago when I had the guest come in when the COVID thing happened, I was thinking, man, I booked our virologist months in advance, and after I booked her, I was thinking to myself, that was a bad pick. But by the time she does the show with us, this whole COVID thing will have blown over and it won't be an issue. Well, by the time she ended up in the seat, it was at the height of the peak, and it was definitely timely. And our conversation tonight about the church and about society and about the police and law enforcement, this is a good time, huh? The irony of this. But I was thinking the same thing when we booked Rolondo. I was like, you know what? By the time he sits in the chair, everything's going to be back to normal. There won't be any issues. Everything's going to calm down. And it's obviously, if you've been watching the news, it's the exact opposite of things are calming down. So, Rolondo, welcome. Welcome to Granite Creek. Thank you so much. I know you have a busy schedule, so it's such an honor to have you with us. Okay, before I start asking you some questions, I got to go over Rolondo's resume, which is extremely impressive. So, in addition for serving on the City of Claremont Police Commission, so he is a commissioner, but you're not like a Batman, like the commissioner from Batman. Do you have a bat phone?
No, I don't.
He doesn't have a bat phone. But he serves on the police commission. And you want to explain what you do there and what the City of Claremont Police Commission is?
Yeah, totally. So the City of Claremont has a police commission, which a lot of people don't know. There's 7 members total. We're all volunteers. We've all been selected from the community to represent the community when working with both the police department and the city. And so we have a couple of key roles. One is to sort of review and make comment on police policies and procedures. So we get the opportunity to understand how police do their daily business and then provide a comment and recommendations if there's any changes or things that we'd like to keep. We also get to help set goals and priorities for the department. So that's working along with the chief and ensuring that whatever goals do get set actually are met. And then lastly, we provide, and I think most importantly, we provide a public forum for those in the community to voice their concerns about policing in the city or anything else that they want to talk about that has to do with policing. We provide that forum through our public-facing meetings for them to attend and be heard.
That's really cool. Now, do most cities have a commission like ours?
No, actually they don't. Not most cities don't. Larger cities like LA, San Francisco do. Some of the smaller cities comparable to our size don't have a commission quite like ours. They might have a civilian oversight or some other type of entity. But the way that the city of Claremont has constructed their commission is pretty unique in the relationship that we have both with the department and the city and the residents of the city of Claremont.
That's cool. How long have we had one?
So we've had one actually since 1999, shortly after the shooting of Urban Landrum Jr. That was one of the things that came out of that investigation was to have a police commission of folks from the city to help make comment and recommendations on police policies and procedures. So it's been a while that we've had a police commission in place in the city of Claremont.
And how long have you been serving?
So it's been a little bit over a year.
Yay!
I've got another year left in my current term, and then I can be up for, I guess, reappointment to the commission.
Wow. Did you expect? You didn't expect this, did you?
No, I didn't. But the call to serve and to be of service to the community was the ultimate goal. So I was willing to take whatever came.
Okay. On that point, I wanna go over your resume. I've got to do this. Okay, so he has a real job. So he's the senior director of project management for Pomona College, and he leads the technology-related projects for the colleges. So, because of COVID, you're a busy guy.
It is a busy time.
Yeah.
It is a busy time. We've taken a residential small liberal arts college and made it go online, but keeping that same small liberal arts college.
Yeah, is it working? Is it feeling?
I think all things being, even and considered, yes, it is. I think there's a couple of hiccups that we're working through, but classes are being held and students are learning, so I'll take that as a win.
Awesome. Okay, before that, you worked for COMCAST, NBCUniversal as a senior project manager. It says that you worked on blockbuster movies. Can you give us one?
Oh gosh, what was the last movie that I had? I don't even remember. This was such a long time ago. I mean, the Olympics is what sticks out in my mind.
That's
because
awesome.
That was, from a technology standpoint, we were doing some pretty cool, innovative things. But yeah, there was just so much going on.
So you've been a busy guy.
Yeah.
And television shows as well.
Television shows as well, yeah.
Okay, now this is what I'm interested in, and I think this gets into the area of your heart. You are a third-generation United States Air Force officer.
That's correct.
3 generations.
3 generations.
So it's in the family. It's in the blood.
It is in the blood.
Wow. And you're a father.
I am.
Do you want your kids to go into the military? Is that...
Yeah, I want my kids to know all the options that are available in life, and should, their path lead towards the military, then we'll have a good conversation about that.
Yeah. All right, you're a decorated disabled veteran, and you served in combat, served as a combat intelligence officer. So the reason why we're doing Rolondo and myself is because Mako is going to have him next week, and having the conversation next week, and Mako thinks that he's a spy. So she's going to ask those questions, but I won't do that because I'm more sensitive. But it says you're combat intelligence officers during Operation Joint Forge in Bosnia. That was years ago, yeah?
A very long time ago, yeah.
Wow. We actually did some aid work in Bosnia when that happened. We sent some humanitarian aid during that season. Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. Operation Iraqi Freedom in Iraq. How many tours did you do?
Oh gosh, I stopped counting at 5.
Are you serious?
The 5th tour I think that's when I tapped out and said, that we've met our obligation and service, and it's time to kind of hang up and start a new chapter in our lives.
So, on behalf of Granite Creek, we just thank you for your military service. That means a lot to us, and that, you're in combat. It's a big deal. So thank you. Thank you so much for fighting for our freedom. Is there anything you want to add to your military service? I know I threw it all out there, but okay, just give me your number one memory.
Number one memory.
Overseas.
I think my number one memory that's somewhat annoying, I think, to people I talk to, was I was in the Middle East during one of the hottest days. I think it hit the Guinness World Book record at the time. So this was many years ago. I think it's surpassed that now at about 127 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
125. I don't remember exactly, but it was. So my joke is there's a definite difference in temperature between like 120 to 125. You feel the pain of that extra 5 degrees. So yeah, that was not fun. But.
Wow. And your wife is an attorney locally. Where did you meet your wife?
We met in college, actually.
Okay.
We met as
by the way, UCLA grad.
UCLA.
Okay.
Throw that in there. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we met we met initially as freshmen, but really didn't start dating until we were seniors in college.
And then you went into officer training school after college?
That's correct. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So she's been with you a long time.
It has been 18 years
18
as
years.
of next week.
Going strong.
Yeah.
All right. And then I'll save the last little thing that you do for the last when we close. All right. So in addition to that, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and we got your resume, but like, what do you do, or what do you enjoy doing? What has you have a resume of service. Yeah. So what has drawn you to serve on a commission and do it for free? So,
yeah, So yeah, I think just growing up, service was just in my blood. My
Yeah.
father is a police officer,
I forgot to
retired
add that,
after.
yeah.
He's a police officer, retired after 35 years in the
Wow.
police department, and was a veteran himself. And so and it was very politically active in his unions and things like that. So I think I just grew up seeing that.
What city was he in?
Santa Monica and
Okay.
Culver City, so in West LA
it.
area. And so just kind of seeing that growing up, that was what I knew.
Yeah.
Was that service. And I think my mom instilled in me on the biblical side of service and being of service and really, giving to the community and giving of oneself was part of the teachings that I grew up learning. So, I was getting it from both parents. And so, it was really all I really knew,
Yeah.
to be honest. And so, I think kind of growing up and thinking about what I wanted to do with my life and things like that, service was always a component that was part of it. So I think now, when we first moved to Claremont about almost 7 years ago, there was always a thought it was just a second nature. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, how are we going to serve the city that we chose to raise our children in and to be a part of? And it was really just looking for what made the most sense. And
Yeah.
so for me, the police commission seemed like a group where I could do a lot of good and be of service to the community. So it was sort of a no-brainer for me in terms of service.
And what drew you to the city of Claremont?
I think when I got out of the military, we were looking for that, perfect place to settle down and raise our family. And
Yeah.
we lived in a number of cities, and I've lived all across the country. And, we were just looking for a place that, we, had great schools and a place where,
Bedroom
we could
community
start
and
a
then-
community
yeah.
vibe, a place where my wife can have her business, a place where I can thrive in my career. And Claremont fit a lot of those bills for us. And so it just made sense. And we're firm believers that, God draws you to those things. And so, I think there's no accident that we're here in Claremont. I think
That's
this was
awesome.
directly God-driven, so.
That's so cool. And you have a daughter at El Roble
Yeah.
and a son at...
And Chaparral.
Chaparral,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All right. Okay. We asked what the police commission is, what its mission is, and what its purpose. Can you give us... I know you can't speak directly for the department. During the season and all the craziness that's going on in our nation, how is the police force in Claremont? How are they feeling? Like, what's the morale? How are they holding up?
Yeah, it's as you said earlier, this definitely is a season.
Yeah.
I think we're all going through, and so police officers are humans just like
Yeah.
anybody else. So I'm sure that they're feeling that pressure. I think we had a police commission meeting in July 9th, and we heard a lot from the community. The meeting was over 6 hours long.
Oh my gosh.
But it was a really good meeting, and we heard a lot of feedback from the community, and a lot of express their not only support for the officers, but concerns about that they've had about policing in the city of Claremont. And what we decided as a commission to do was to form basically the beginning of three ad hoc committees to really start to deep dive into some of these issues.
Yeah.
And so one of them, for example, is taking a look at how citizens, residents, and visitors can actually file complaints to the police department and doing so in a more transparent, accessible way. Another was looking at specifically use of force policies and really diving deep into those policies and how to make, again, that an accessible and transparent type of process. And then the last was really a recognition on behalf of the commissioners that we needed to get out into the community and let people know that we don't have a bat phone,
Yeah.
first of all, but what we do and that we represent the community and their voice when it comes to working with the police department and the city, and really get out there and reach out to local churches, community organizations, and even individuals to have these conversations, and most importantly, just listen.
Yeah.
I think for me in particular, my focus was on listening and reaching out proactively to those groups within our city and beyond that maybe didn't even know they had a voice, or there was somebody there that wanted to hear from them.
Yeah.
And really giving them that opportunity and that platform, using my own privilege as a commissioner to say, we want to hear you, we want to hear your thoughts of how we can make things better, what's going great that we can preserve. And so it's just been a really eye-opening experience for me, and really one that I think as commissioners, I think I can speak on their behalf of saying it's been a great experience to kind of get out in the community and build those relationships and collect that feedback.
Yeah, I really appreciate you reaching out to us, because I wasn't even aware that you guys were this active.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely been a good thing. Claremont is a unique city. It's an unusual little gem in Inland Empire, the last city in Los Angeles County, college town. House prices are higher here than they are in our neighbors' cities. Is there a lot of crime in the city compared to our neighbored cities, or is there a difference in this community compared to other communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think strictly from a statistic standpoint, there is a stark difference, and I think that is nothing short of testament to our police department and the residents of the city. But that doesn't mean that we don't have issues here, just like any other city, and there's things that we want to change and maintain. And I think really that's the draw of a city like Claremont, why we get so many visitors and folks that are looking to move here, is because of the safety and that community feel. And so as a commissioner and raising a family here, I have a vested interest in making sure that Claremont remains a city that's inclusive and welcome to all, and then also has the policies and procedures in place to make sure that everybody can thrive here and flourish.
Yeah. So, my gosh, I have been on staff here in Claremont 18 years, 19 years, and I've grown up here in this church. So, I've been in this community for a very long time. And believe it or not, we have seen crime here in the church, not by our staff or anything, but we've had vandalism, we've had theft, we've had windows broken for no apparent reason, and I do have to say that the Claremont Police Department has been awesome to work with. They've been very responsive. We've even had situations where maybe our staff is working late at night and there's something weird in the park, something weird going on in the parking lot, and we just call and they're here. And I just like wow, that's like a blessing to have a community police force where not only know that we can rely on them coming, but we feel like we know them too. And Officer Shelley, or Chief Shelley, she's been at a couple of our events, and it's just awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, so we're so grateful for that. Is that a unique experience for cities to have that type of a community involvement with the police force, or is my experience off? Or
No, and I think that's the power of community policing is that community-centric, community-driven policing, to get to know your neighbors, to invest in the community. And I think that's one of the things that the police department does really, really well, is making those connections and being out there. I know the chief is at Chamber of Commerce meetings, and she's over here, she's doing all these type of things. And I think, I commend her for that, because I think that's really, making those connections and making those personal connections is really key, to ensuring that the city remains safe. And so, I think that's one of the special secret sauces that we're interested in preserving and figuring out ways, again, making sure that the city remains inclusive and all those type of things are in play, but finding that balance of where we can have both community policing and a city that just flourishes.
Yeah. Okay, so in the news, I don't know what the latest is right now, but there was talks, I'm not even sure if there was a decision, so if I'm not quite clear on it, I'm sure not everybody else is quite clear on it, but is the County of Los Angeles, are they going to take over the police operations in the city, or is that?
Right.
What's the latest news on that?
Yeah, so the latest news on that was City Council voted to not pursue that option. I think the community came out This was several months ago, but the community came out in force, as
Yeah.
Claremont can do,
Yep.
to voice their opinion in support of the police department. I don't recall how long public comment went, but I know it went well over an hour,
Yeah.
probably a couple of hours, to express their concerns about the county taking over. And again, I applaud that decision as well, because that's when we talk about community policing, and what makes Claremont special. Bringing in the county is not what does that. It would really change the way the city operates, and so I, for one, am glad we didn't go that route. And so now is the hard work, is making sure that the police department is not only funded, but that all those other things that we've talked about earlier are in place.
Was funding the number one thing, or?
No, I think there was a bunch of issues. Funding is certainly a huge part of it. A lot of cities are financially strapped now, so funding is definitely a concern. I think COVID brought a whole nother dimension to this whole kind of conversation.
Yeah.
But it was really, it's the way, and I've seen this before in other departments, as other cities grow, they look to Claremont as a place where they've got great officers, experienced officers, and they want some of that for themselves. And so coming into a place like Claremont and attracting our officers with whatever that they have to offer, it can be very tempting. And I think the commitment that our officers have to the city of Claremont, and doing those things to make change and to make, again, the city more inclusive and welcoming to visitors and residents, I think is what will keep Claremont being especially unique as it is.
All right, let's talk about some of the current things that are going on. So, I have never felt afraid of our Claremont Police Department, but maybe there's people in our community that do. I don't know. Again, all of my experience with them has been very positive. I feel like they're here to protect and to serve us. But maybe that's some of the things that you do as a commission. And it seems that, if a police department is underfunded, maybe they don't have access to enough training or enough resources. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing all this out there. But as a person serving on the police commission, like, how do you feel about all of the rhetoric that's being thrown out in the news in cities that are in turmoil compared to ours? Maybe help us define some of the buzzwords or the buzz phrases, like defund the police, all this stuff that's going on. We can even talk about race. We've spent a number of faith conversations talking about race, but it probably would be appropriate to address it in this context, because we're talking about the relationship between the police authority, the power of authority that a community has in relation to faith and to relation to the community. Justice is obviously a big concern for the church. So I know there's a lot out there right now, but okay, so like, from your position, how are you feeling about, let's just say, the whole defund the police movement?
Yeah, no, and I think one of the fantastic things about this committee that I co-chair, which is the Community Outreach Committee, is the opportunity to get out there and really hear from the residents, and visitors of Claremont, the things that they think about, and be able to bring that back to make action on it. And I think one of the most powerful things that I've personally experienced is hearing those lived experiences, particularly people of color within Claremont, who have a different reality, a different experience within Claremont. I think, as we said earlier, Claremont's not perfect. Claremont has its issues that we have to work through, but Claremont certainly isn't, at an opposite extreme. And I think it's important to recognize that for all the things that we can do to make Claremont better and bring change to Claremont, it is a far cry from some of the things
Some
that
of
we're
the
seeing in the
atrocities
news.
that we see.
Yeah, and I think, when we talk specifically about defunding the police, I think what I've found is that, that really is a definition that means many different things
Yeah.
to many different people. I think, at least for me personally in the conversations that I have with other folks, it's really talking about looking at what the police does as core functions and what of those functions, both, in action that the police does and then what's actually funded for them to do, can be done and better situated in other areas. So when we think of things like social services, mental health counselors,
Yeah.
those type of things, oftentimes we find that police officers, for one reason or the other, whether it be funding or resources, end up having to serve some of those functions
Yeah.
that maybe they're not the best person to do, or
Yeah.
there's maybe trained professionals. And so when I think of defunding the police, we talk about moving, making sure that those responsibilities are in the hands of those who are specifically trained, and usually that requires some budget to move. Having the police there as a resource,
Yeah.
if needed, in those type of situations. And so that's the way that in the conversation that I've had, that I've sort of approached that. But
Yeah.
obviously, it runs the spectrum of, everything from, completely disbanding the police department to reducing their overall
Reallocating.
budgets.
Yeah. Let me give you an illustration of that, because I think we have a similar experience. So you talk about mental health issues. Maybe the police shouldn't handle a mental health case. That could be a viable question. From a church experience, in some ways, a local community church can be, I don't know how to say this in a sensitive way, but it can be a magnet to mentally unstable individuals, whether they're coming, for handouts or resources or what. Like we found it in our own deficit as people who serve the community, like, oh my gosh, I don't have the skills to help this person. Like, I didn't go to college for this one. Like, this person is unstable and irrational, mentally ill, and I'm calling the cops. So that's usually the case there. And I don't know if that's necessarily the best solution. But that has been our experience. And I know that, as a church leader in the community, like I do have to help people that are mentally unstable. And we do. And we have a great counseling ministry at the church. But there is that line where it's like, this person needs to be hospitalized. Mm-hmm. And so would that play into something like that?
Yeah, that's exactly, I think, is what we're talking about here, is recognizing that maybe I'm not the best resource to help this individual. I think when we talk specifically about defunding the police, it's like, what are those appropriate resources? Of course, with the caveat of, being of harm to themselves, and obviously you want to call. But, we see this in our homeless population, our home insecure population, and in other areas where, the city, we can reallocate funds, or we can look for alternative resources to provide, to provide those services that they need, and using the police then as a resource in only those, dire of situations that's, recommended by one of those professionals, I think is really where the conversation ought to be.
Yeah. I didn't prep you for this one, but do you think that the police are asked to do things that's probably outside of their skill set, or things that they shouldn't be doing?
Yeah, no, and I think that's emblematic and symptomatic of a city that's still trying to figure out, how best to fund those type of things. So absolutely, I do. I think, and the Claremont, Police Department is going to step up and answer those calls. They're not going to turn those calls down. So I think it's really taking a look at how, our human services are budgeted, and really having a good conversation to say, where can we make those changes? And I think, again, part of the benefit of having these conversations is that they're actually being had, and we have so much intellectual capital here in the city of Claremont that, the ability to come up with solutions that position Claremont as leaders, really, honestly, amongst other cities is something that invigorates me. When I feel tired of having meetings, or I'm feeling worn out, the idea of just the brain power alone to come up with just resourceful and innovative ideas is what motivates me.
Okay, so I didn't prep you for this one either, but I'm just kind of, so we are. I mean, I know LA is looking at it already. Orange County has, but the homeless epidemic, really, it's getting worse and worse and worse. Should the police force be a part of that solution, or do we need to come up with other ways to handle our homeless situation?
I sound like a broken record,
Yeah.
but I think one of the things that's so been transformative for me in this process is being able to reach out to different groups. I didn't know prior to this process of community outreach that we have groups that work directly with the homeless and work with the police department as well. And one of the things that we hear from these groups is help us foster better relationships, not only with the community and the police department. And so I think, there's still work that can be done in that area, but, I'm, again, motivated and inspired by the work that people are doing to support our homeless and our home insecure. And so I think we have those resources. I think now it's just a matter of figuring out how to better partner with one another in those areas of funding, get better funding for those areas. But I definitely think that there's opportunity, and now is as good a time as any to help work through some of those challenges and make sure that we can, put those resources that can, help in those areas specifically to it. So I'd be a little concerned if we didn't have organizations that were out there and say, oh, maybe, the police are all we've got, but that's not the case in Claremont. We're really blessed to have those concerned residents who have started, their organizations to deal with those type of things here in Claremont.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Some of the other hot issues right now. Abuse of police force. Again, we haven't experienced it in our community, but our nation is experiencing it. It's scary. Like, Mako and I are not gun people, so we don't own a gun, maybe a BB gun. But we've had conversations of that lately. It's like, maybe, we need to protect our family. I still don't think I'm going to get a gun. But it seems to be, I don't know, maybe we should unplug and not watch the news. But it seems that things are boiling over right now, and once we think that things have calmed down, something happens and it seems like it gets worse. I know you've talked to our friend Norman Coulter about the whole idea of systemic racism, that it is, and again, I don't see it in our community, but in other communities, obviously it looks like it's taking place, that there is a systemic racism, and it's just like dumb us. Sometimes we're like, really? It's like, what? But on a more macro level, and as a commissioner and as somebody that served in the military and coming from a police family, from your experience, from your perspective, does the police force in our nation need to be revised, redone? What do you think? I know it's a big.
Yeah, no, it's a meaty topic. Yeah, we could be here all night talking about it. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that we have to, in order to have a really truthful and honest conversation, we have to agree, and we have to take a look at the history of policing in this country and where it started, and understand that the roots of policing just in general, regardless of where it's at and how it was constructed, was built on a system of oppression and built on a system that in and of itself is inherently flawed. So I think if we can get over that hump, which is a monumental hump, granted, then we can start having more and more honest conversations about how we can put things in place. I think, again, one of the benefits of a city like Claremont and the work that we're doing now is we're able to have those conversations and really listen to specifically the lived experiences of people of color, to understand and to say, a particular policy, for example, on its face may seem benign, but and put in a different context. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot across the country, is put into different contexts and look through different lenses, how detrimental and the impact of those policies can have, particularly on people of color and other underrepresented groups, and really taking a step back and saying, okay, is this policy, what was this policy originally meant to do? And having those conversations, I think, is really the key first step. And so, the fact that we have this committee and that we're reaching out and listening, I think is a tremendous first step in taking us, forward to making those changes. There's a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And I think these conversations need to keep happening, and we need to, make change and reevaluate and reassess. But as I wrote in an article not too long ago for the Courier, if we do that together, I think that's where I'm hopeful that we'll be able to make that change and again, make Claremont an inclusive place.
And I just want to plug that article. It's a great article, by the way, so you can get it still on Courier Courier Online. They've got it. You can read it. But it's a great article.
Thank you
it's
so
very,
much.
very well thought out. And I think also it speaks into your desire to serve your city, and I love it. One of the, again, I'm trying to stay away from Facebook. It's like, oh my gosh.
It draws you in.
Oh, it's just awful. I'm gonna fast Facebook. And you see, you see the spectrum. You see the political spectrum, and then you see some perspectives of people that you were like shocked that like what, and there is, kind of what we experienced, but there's a lot of anger being expressed and a lot of fear. And as a church, we can't be stoking fires of fear. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is no fear. There's freedom. And so that's, that is our heart's desire. And it's the purpose why we're having, these types of conversations on a Wednesday night, and I'm not using the pulpit as a soapbox for whatever agenda I might have at the moment. I'm pure gospel on Sunday. And regardless, the church needs to be having conversations like this. So some of the things that we see and hear, whether it's people in the church or outside the church, friends, whatever, there is this, fear of the rioting and the looting and the theft and all that kind of stuff, the attack on personal property and physical well-being. Do you have any insight on that? How does that make you feel as somebody serving on the commission? Is your father alive still?
Yes, he is. Yeah, he's still serving too.
He's still serving.
He's
You're
still
kidding me.
serving. He's retired and is still serving the city that he lives in, and yeah, so it doesn't stop.
And would you feel comfortable sharing your dad's opinion on all this craziness?
Yeah, I mean, I think, my dad lived through the Rodney King riots in L.A. I got to see that firsthand, and see my father mobilize and take to the streets to protect property. I've seen and experienced my own, through this new sort of wave of frustration that's out there in the community. And, I think, it's hard to describe, and I've done these talks before, and it's really hard to describe kind of that lived experience. I think we were talking a little bit earlier, or Miko and I were, about, just being tired of having to be in this type of, do this again. Yeah. And, I think that frustration comes out in many different ways. I, for one, look for that frustration to come out more creatively and constructively, but that's not always, available and an option for folks. And so, I think, again, as part of the benefit of these kind of conversations is we can get out and have these conversations and reach out to different communities, not to explain anything like that, but just to listen and to know that those concerns are being heard, and in the areas where we can make change and help address those throughout our privileges being commissioners, we do that. But I think, really it's hearing and being heard is what, this frustration really is. And so in a small way as commissioners, we provide that outlet as providing those community forums. And I think as commissioners, we realize the need to proactively go out into the community and do that. And I think part of that is helping, for those who are frustrated and angered, to get those, regardless of what you feel, where that frustration and anger is coming from, to have an opportunity to express that in a constructive way, and then we can have a dialogue as to how we can make change and work together to move things forward. And I think, my hope would be is that more of that can happen. But here in the city, I think that's resonated with a lot of folks, of having those type of conversations. And then, I've been encouraged by, folks who maybe didn't want to become active or have their voice heard are now forming groups or forming those. Granted, you have the Facebook element to it, but those folks who have created groups within the city of Claremont and our surrounding cities. We've got 2 very important elections coming up here in the city of Claremont, for city council and the school board. And just the depth of conversation is unlike anything I've ever seen. I'm a little bit of a political junkie kind of in my past, and just seeing the level of engagement and the depth of the conversations, again, makes me hopeful that, the city of Claremont's on the right track to have these type of conversations and make the change that's necessary to, again, make a better place for our children to grow up here in Claremont, and to feel included in the city and flourish. So I'm really excited about the opportunities and potential that the city has.
That's so cool. Okay, so one of the things I love about the city, believe it or not, I love that they're very vocal.
Yeah.
And I'm a free speech, free will, I have a free will theology. So I've got a free speech theology too. So I actually love the fact that our city protests. And we've seen, again, both sides of issues protest. And I think they've done a great job doing it. I love our city that they voice their free speech, and they do it in a civil way for the most part, unless you have any other experiences. But from what I've seen, they've been very, no one is acting out in violence. And they've been very respectful. Even on an academic level, there's been a huge amounts of respect. There's respect for other faiths. There's my atheist friends respect me for some reason, and likewise. So that's what's awesome about our city, is that we can speak out freely, protest in a safe way. I'm sure you've had this conversation, and I'm sure the police department has had this conversation. If there were riots, how would the city handle it? If there were vandalism and looting and the horrible things that we see that happen in other cities, how would Claremont handle something like that?
Well, I think that's a big if, but I have.
I can't even imagine seeing it, but.
One of the things that and I echo your sentiments about the level of engagement in a city like Claremont. I think is amazing, and I think if anything, we talked a little bit about this earlier. Figuring out ways to engage those people who don't know they have a voice and aren't regularly heard from is now the next step in that. I have. When I just think of the pandemic and kind of what we've gone through thus far, and how the chief has sort of prepared and has been transparent about the measures that are put in place, for the officers' rotation and make sure shifts are covered and wearing a face cover and everything like that. I have, that's probably the furthest thing from my mind right now is if something like that, but I have full faith and confidence that how our officers train and the plans that are put in place are ones that are going to protect, the city of Claremont.
That is so encouraging.
Yeah, I think that's it's very much true. And I see my role again as a commissioner to really do some of the tougher work of saying, let's dig a little bit deeper and make sure that the plans and the policies and procedures that are in place are equitable and that they're inclusive and those type of things. But I don't even, I think, just that thought alone is something I don't even think about, which I think is a huge compliment to, the police department in the city,
Absolutely.
City of Claremont.
I'm not going to name any other cities by name, but we could see it in cities closer to us, right? It's a possibility.
Certainly, yeah.
What do you think a local church's response would be to something as horrific that happened in, was it Wisconsin, or yeah. I mean, what do you think the church's role should be? Something like that.
Well, first and foremost, I think the church's role is to pray for
Yeah.
for all
Yeah.
that are in the city.
Yeah.
For our elected officials, the police department.
Yeah.
Pray for us commissioners.
Yes.
Pray for
You
everybody.
need it, huh?
Yeah. We all need it, and
Yeah.
I think definitely. First and foremost, that should be it. I think having these type of conversations and providing the platform, I think, is a tremendous benefit to a city like Claremont. And so, thank you for that, and being willing to have these type of conversations and opening up, which I think is very powerful. I think providing resources is another way of, as I mentioned before, I was unaware of the work that's being done with the homeless and the home insecure here in the city of Claremont. And finding ways to connect those who need services in the city of Claremont with those resources. I see the church as being a really great way, and I would be remiss without saying helping those who seem lost to find their way to Jesus is right up there on my list, and I think we're in a time right now where people are lost and they're searching for answers, and I see a place like this as being primed to say, hey, there's a way to find that peace that you're searching for, and being able to provide whatever services they need in that regard.
Yeah, that is. I don't want to say it's a new vision for us, but how do we as a church provide a sanctuary, a safe place for everybody? That one's always a tough one.
Yeah.
But to be inclusive to everybody and everybody's opinions and everybody's political leanings. Like, this is the place for everybody to come and experience the presence of God. There's a lot of rights and wrongs. It seems right now in our society there's tons of gray area. And I believe, so we're going to get a little more into the faith side of things now. I believe that true conviction comes from the Holy Spirit, and that truth comes from the Holy Spirit, and it leads us and it guides us. And honestly, that's why we're here doing this now. Because when Floyd happened, when I heard Floyd happen, I had that same response that we talked about earlier. Like, really? Do we have to go through this again? Like, that was my initial response when I heard about that killing. And then I saw it, and then the Holy Spirit came in and said, yes, you do. You do have to have this conversation, and you do, as a church, have to walk through this situation again. I'm like, okay, Lord, yes. So obviously, the Band-Aid didn't work, and we still need our country to grow and to heal. But more importantly, brothers and sisters in Christ need to come together and be the church that God's called us to be. And so, again, I asked this already, but again, we can flesh it out some more. How does the church support a society in a healthy way? What can we do practically to encourage the police department? What can we do practically to, heal the systemic racism that's taking place? Besides, we have conversations, but what can we do practically about this?
No, that's a great question, and I think, practically, we talked a little bit earlier about, listening to those lived experiences of folks specifically here within the city of Claremont, and a lot of things that I do when I talk to groups, especially those that share those stories, is to say, look, we have a process by which we can investigate those and we can adjudicate them and make changes and things like that. Let's work through that process in order to do that. And so that would be one thing that I would ask the church to do is, if you do come across those, those incidents or those stories, let's work together. Let's make sure that we get, we go through the proper, channels that the department has outlined so that we can get those looked at a little bit further. But definitely, I think, in terms of practicality is really, it sounds like we're saying the same thing over again, but really the power of having these conversations is can't be understated. I think, it's oftentimes, with this social media, era,
Yeah.
it's easy to sort of just, sit in your camp and be content.
Yeah.
And I think having these conversations and providing a safe space where we can
Yeah.
be heard is really going to be beneficial to best. But, really I think, listening to those lived experiences, having these type of conversations is really what we need right
Yeah.
now. Perhaps later, when we can talk about more, practical things.
Yeah.
Another thing I would add is to get involved, I think is another practical way.
Yeah.
So, outside of the church, joining those groups that are here in Claremont, whether it be with the homeless advocacy or other human services or
Yeah.
some of the other change groups that are within the city, that's another way to do it, to do that. And another practical way is to join our police commission meeting
Yay.
tomorrow night. Call in and be heard. Or,
Yeah.
for those folks, one of the things that I talk with some of the residents is, we're doing everything, we live and die by Zoom right now, which is great to
Yeah.
have this in-person conversation.
Yeah, I know.
Haven't had one
I
of these
hate
in a
Zoom
while.
right now.
But, especially those communities that we don't hear from often, Zoom's
Yeah.
just not a practical way to engage. And so,
Yeah.
we're looking at more and more equitable and accessible ways of reaching out to those communities. But I often say, hey, write directly to us as commissioners, to us
I'm
via
sure you get some
email.
of those,
And
huh?
we do,
Yeah.
and people take us up on that. As part of this community outreach, one of the commitments that we've put forward as part of this committee is to say, hey, if you're an individual that just wants to have a conversation, we're more than willing to do that and be flexible with our schedules to have that conversation. So, we're doing the best we can to do the reach out, but, definitely we ask, show up to our meetings, make your voice heard, reach out to us directly. And then the last plug that I would put is that, if there's other organizations that the church feels or individuals out there that feel would benefit from these type of conversations with us as commissioners, to reach out with us and help us connect with those individuals. And that's actually been very powerful because we've had folks that say, hey, you really should talk to so-and-so. And we're on the phone the next day having
That's
these
so cool.
conversations, or you should meet this group, or you should talk to these folks. And so that's really been how this has sort of spread, and we've been able to get as great feedback as we have to make these recommendations.
Do you
really
see there's like a lot of different groups inside of Claremont?
Yeah. There are a number of groups. I think tomorrow we'll talk about. I think we've had to date about 15 conversations like these, either with faith-based institutions, community organizations, or just individuals, which has totaled up anywhere to about 15 to 16 hours worth of conversations that we've had, which is a
Jeez.
lot of data.
That is.
But we've made a commitment to keep this going because I don't think
Yeah.
it's a one and done type of thing. I think we need to continue to have these conversations and report back out, and this be more of a cyclical type of thing that we do when it comes to this type of outreach.
So are you looking for conversations or directing a conversation towards like what we have in common rather than all the differences that we have? Is that?
If my positive nature says
Yeah.
yes, that would be great to have those conversations. But we have to also hear what maybe where there are some differences.
Yeah.
I think one of the important things that we wanted to do with this community outreach is, we want to collect the data on the things that need to change, that things aren't working.
Yeah.
But we also want to make sure that we don't lose, I call it the secret sauce or the special sauce of what
Yeah.
makes Claremont. And make sure that we hear about the things that are working right, so we can
Yeah.
continue to make sure that those things are funded and those policies or procedures are preserved. So, we want to hear it all. We want to collect that data so that we ourselves are inclusive of the information that we're hearing.
That's so cool. One of the things that frustrated me in church leadership, church growth, church philosophy was, it's in books, it's in conferences, it's in seminaries, is this tribal mentality. And it's not just church, it's corporate world too. But they'll say and they'll train, if you want to grow your church, you need to build your tribe. You need to hone in on your target audience. And I've always hated that. And I've always kind of rejected it because I don't think it's gospel, and I don't think it's Acts 2. So Acts 2, you had an inclusive experience in the upper room with the Holy Spirit, where all nations and all tribes were represented, and they all had something in common, which was the Holy Spirit. And so I think, when I see chatter, I see tribalism, and it's very frustrating to me. And I'm just kind of just spitting it out there. I see that might be part of the problem. Like, I've got my tribe, I've got my political party that, I shouldn't say that word, I have that political party that supersedes the gospel or God. Or I have my tribe that's more important to me than the worldwide church. So, I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing that out there because you are a man of faith. And I don't know, maybe that's why you're called to serve in this area, because you're building bridges between different communities with something that we think that everybody should have in common. So, with that big giant rambling, how has faith, how has it led your life, or how has it directed your calling to serve in education, military, law enforcement? How has your faith directed you in these areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think to answer that is really kind of my journey in faith, which I don't think is necessarily unique. I think it's fairly common, but I think the kind of the full circle is what brought me here today. And I think I grew up in the church. I've been going to church since I was 3 years old. Went to one of the largest churches in Los Angeles.
Which one?
Crenshaw Christian Center. Yeah. So my mom is still a member there, and so I grew up in that environment. And I think as when you get into your teens and your early 20s, you start questioning things. And I think for me, the way I kind of liken it is I think I had a great foundation in faith, but it wasn't earthquake tested. It wasn't stress tested. And so when stress came and shook me off my foundation a little bit, it was easy to sort of crumble. And I think I faltered for a number of years. But certainly through my military experience and the things that I've gone through and how many times I shouldn't be here today type of stories that I have, yet I'm here. And really, quite honestly, growing up with friends, you talked a little bit before about atheists. I had really great friends that I grew up with that were atheists that are now believers, and seeing what God did in their lives was transformative to me to say, I wasn't even at their point in their lives, and God has completely changed them around, was very impactful to me. And then certainly having children and thinking about that certainly changes everything. And so I think that brings me full circle to the point where I'm at now, where I look back at my life and I see that God was always there, whether or not I saw him, whether or not I heard him. He was always there and guiding me. And I had, just enough to listen to that small voice. And so I think now, being older and wiser and watching my children grow up in faith, it's something that, is the cornerstone of everything that I do. And so definitely I think that is, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'll be the first to say, you read the resume and I'm exhausted, but I do know that as long as what I do remains God-centered, then then I don't have to worry about that. God has taken that from me. So I think this is God at work personally for me, and it's taken me into a lot of different paths. I appreciate the opportunity to talk, because I don't get a chance to talk about kind of the faith side of what I do, and why I do what I do. So it's great to talk about that, but I definitely think that's at play here, and I'm along for the ride, really.
So do you feel like you're functioning inside of your calling? That's a really churchy question.
I would almost feel like it would be too presumptuous to say, yes, because I don't know what God's doing, and I think I just need to listen to what's, it's funny, this article that I wrote for the Courier, one of the things I do is I love to write. I think that's my passion.
Oh, cool.
I wrote for parenting magazines, something that's not in my bio. I wrote for parenting magazines for years.
Are you kidding me?
and-
That's
I
awesome.
wish I
Oh my
was.
gosh, what haven't you done?
I know. And, you know, and so as a writer, you know, you have a process that you go through, and you go through revisions, and you scrap it, and you rewrite, and everything like that. With this particular article that I wrote for the Courier, it was just something that I felt that I needed to say and to express.
Yeah.
I wrote that article at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it took me 10 minutes to write, which is completely different from any of my writing processes. And so, you know, for me, to me, that's God. It wasn't me thinking of what I wrote, but it was really just an honest expression of what it's like to be a person of color living in Claremont, and my thoughts about, you know, how to make this city inclusive. And so that's the only thing I can attribute it to, because I couldn't even tell you why I thought of writing it then and getting it public and all those type of things. It's a blur.
So it was like a download.
It was download. It was almost like, you know, we joke because there's this movie that we like, and there's a scene in this movie where the character is kind of spitting out a bunch of facts, and he's, you know, they're like, "Wow, I didn't know you knew all that." And he's like, "I kind of blacked out for a moment." That's kind of what it was like for me. It was like I didn't know what was happening, but you know, that's God. We know that is God, and so I think that's where I'm at right now. And as more opportunities to have these conversations and to do those work, you know, yes, I'm tired, but you know, God's given me the strength to kind of push through that. So, you know, that's the way I kind of look at it right now.
Okay, so we've been doing this program for a long time. Let me think here. With the exception of the virologist, you're the only other person that is not a pastor. But you are the only person that brought their Bible.
I did.
So,
right here. I
there
got the
we
tabs
go.
too. That's what I was talking about.
So, do you have something that you'd like to share?
You know,
to us
yeah,
from
you
the
know,
Word?
I was doing some reflection this morning in preparation for our conversation and starting school on Zoom for the first time with the kids.
So you're really tired.
Yeah, well, I got the Bible in one hand and doing tech support on Zoom, and you know, I was reflecting on when we talked about kind of my spiritual journey. I was reflecting on when Saul was made king by Samuel in 1 Samuel. I was kind of reading that passage again, and I was recounting on the fact, you know, without going too much detail into it, is how, you know, Saul began to get into his head and think, oh, these things that are, you know, these battles that I'm winning and the way that I'm being a king is because I'm this great person. And Samuel began to rebuke him and said, you know, hey, no, this has nothing to do with you, you know. And I think that's kind of how I feel, but it's a cautionary tale for me, because I think as we have these conversations and as I speak to more and more people and get more out there in the community, I have to remind myself that this isn't me. You know, this is God working through me, and this, you know, this passage really does. It brings me back to, it grounds me, and when I, you know, read what happened to Saul and kind of what led to the rise of David and things like that, that's what kind of keys me into that. And so, you know, that's what I had the tab here just to remind myself to kind of, you know, keep that in. And then, you know, I just remind myself too, in terms of service and why I do what I do. There was one thing that I kind of highlighted.
Let's read it. Go for it.
So this is in Colossians chapter 4, verse 6. It says, let your conversations be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. And that's, when I go into these type of conversations or any conversations, particularly the tough ones, that's kind of what I lead with. And it reminds me just, you know, that's why I'm doing it here. And so, so I got the tabs to kind of keep me.
Well, you definitely have done that.
Yeah, well,
Your conversation was seasoned with salt. You're a wise man.
No.
Let's see, we've gone for, we've got some time. There's a reason why you're drawn to service. And that's because in your own way, you're serving Christ. And I want to commend you for that and for serving the city and serving in all. And there's other things that I didn't read that he serves on for free, by the way.
Yeah.
And
start charging. Figure out how to monetize this.
And so, Good luck with that.
Kidding.
But like I just want to. I don't think I've done this with anybody else. But I just want to speak into you. I want to encourage you that you are doing your calling in your own unique way. And frankly, if you don't do it, it ain't going to get done.
Yeah.
This assignment is assigned to you and you alone. So, so Godspeed with God's calling on your life. Okay. And I can't wait to see what God does in your life. And don't be surprised if you don't get called into ministry too. I'm not going to give you a job, but I'm just saying, like, don't be surprised if your pastor someday says, I want you to be an elder. Yeah. I want you to be, a teacher. Or, like, I can just see that all over you. Yeah. You'd be a great elder.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
and because you have a servant's heart, yeah. And you have a heart to protect. And every pastor that loves his flock needs elders that want to protect the flock. Yeah. So I can see that on you. One other thing I want to plug for you is you have a side hustle. Yeah? You have another thing that you do.
Got a couple.
You have a side hustle that I do. I don't know about the other ones, but I know about this one. But it's called Tactical Career Coaching. Yeah. And so you do corporate coaching, career coaching.
Yeah.
And obviously you're using your military experience to help with that. Do you want to tell us about tactical coaching?
So it's really a passion of mine. So it goes back to kind of my story and transition from the military. Yeah. When I left, as we kind of talked about in my 5th deployment, didn't really, I knew the military had kind of run its course for me, but I really had no idea of what I wanted to do outside of the military. Yeah. And I was actually unemployed for almost a year trying to figure that out.
Oh, wow.
Looking for a job and really just trying to figure out what I was going to do. Not that I'm a spy.
Yeah,
but
that's next week.
That's next week. Yep. But trying to just navigate and translate how what I did, a lot of what I couldn't talk about, into an actual career. Yeah. And so really what came out of that is what I call the tactical system, which is a 7-step system that takes you through each point of what I had to learn on my own, and how to get to a point where I could have a thriving career in the corporate world. And it's, talk about a service, it's really kind of giving back to those. So I do work specifically with active duty military personnel who are transitioning into civilian life and kind of helping them navigate that. But really people who are, especially in this time, who are looking at a new career or maybe just got laid off and they need to reinvent themselves, really providing that service to look, I call it tactically, but it stands for different steps within my system, but really to look intentionally into their careers and really take it to the next level. And so, again, it's just being of service and providing that help that I didn't have when I was transitioning into the private sector and making that available to folks. So
that's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
All right, it's tacticalcareercoaching.com. Check it out. I also want you to encourage, if you know somebody coming out of the military that's lost, maybe you could sponsor them to do this, because I can't imagine going into this world trying to figure out what you're going to do. I mean, we thought it was hard. Can you imagine how hard it would be now? Babe, do we have any questions, or we can bounce the questions to next week? Any online questions that you know of? Okay, so next week we're going to have a different perspective coming from my wife. And again, the reason why Mako and I aren't up here grilling Rolondo is because I value my marriage. And so next week it's going to be even better than my interview with him, because you're going to get Mako's perspective, Mako's questions on all these things that we're going through in our world. And Rolondo's going to field those the best he can. And again, Mako's going to try and figure out if he was a spy or not. So log on next week, same time, same place. In addition to that, if you have any questions for Rolondo that we will answer live online, go ahead and you can ask them in the Facebook feed, and then we'll prepare them in advance so there's no really tough ones. We'll do that for you. I know I asked you a bunch of questions that I didn't tell you I was going to ask.
They were not in my notes.
They were not on his notes. So this is how I roll. But thank you again for coming out. And
My
again, thank
pleasure.
you for serving our city.
My pleasure.
Thank you for serving our country. And thank you for serving even our academic community here in the city.
Pleasure.
You're such a blessing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to close in prayer. God, I thank you so much for the ability and the freedom to have these conversations. I thank you for our city. And God, I pray as a church, we figure out how to best bless our city and how to best bless our police department, how to best bless our other services, service industries inside of our city, fire department, health industry, academic. God, help us to be a support for our city. And I thank you again for godly men and women like Rolondo that are giving of themselves, that are giving of their skills. And God, I pray for peace on our country and our society. It feels so fragmented and broken and hurt, and only you can heal it. So Holy Spirit, come and heal our land. In your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, guys. See you soon. We off?